As we commence the sitting, members will observe that seated in front of us as clerk today, acting for the month, is Ms. Colleen Lowe, our deputy clerk. You will also observe that we have two new faces in the chamber. Ms. Christian Brandon, who is acting in the role of our deputy clerk, and Ms. Sophia Newman, who is acting as the assistant clerk today. You will see these faces for the remainder of this month. Members, this is a part of the Parliament's job rotation initiative to ensure our staff grow and are properly groomed in developing the necessary skill sets as we ensure that we continue proper succession planning and equipping all members of staff to be able to function in all respects in ensuring that our Parliament remains a robust, efficient one and one that plans for the future. Thank you, members. House Leader. My apologies. Clerk, call of the roll.
Thank you, Madam. Mr. Clark, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Holness, Dr. Clark, Dr. Chang, Ms. Grange, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Malahoo Fort, Dr. Tufton, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Charles Jr., Mr. Green, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terrelong, Ms. Smith, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Witter, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brownberg, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Ms. Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Enriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Ms. Morrison, Ms. Garvey, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Samuda, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Siblis, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Wright. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sorry. My apologies, Mr. Warmington. Happy New Year. And Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Clark. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to join you in welcoming members to this final session of the parliamentary year, and in so doing to wish that we have started the year in the fashion that is typical of the spirit and ebullience that characterized our efforts in the previous year, and indeed, Madam Speaker, to think of 24 as a year for more. And in 24, the Parliament will do more, and we will achieve more on behalf of the people of Jamaica. I'd like to also join with you, Madam Speaker, in welcoming the new team of leaders that we have at the administrative end of the Parliament today, and particularly to welcome the new acting clerk, Ms. Colleen Lowe, and her two assistants, Ms. Chesan Brandon and Ms. Sophia Newman. We on this side, and indeed, Madam Speaker, I can speak for both sides of the House, that we welcome and we will provide the fullest collaboration and cooperation with the team to make their 1 month stint with us profitable and efficient indeed. Madam Speaker, as we enter this particular session of the Parliament, Madam Speaker, you know, the more that we spoke about is not more mischief or more interruptions, but more work. So, Madam Speaker, this session will be characterized by, of course, more activity with regards to private members' activities, private members' motion we will be taking due note of, and in fact, we'll be enabling debates on this during this session. The leader of opposition business and myself are collaborating on that to ensure that on my side, our ministers are prepared, and on your side, the priority is established in terms of what these motions are going to be for the session. And this is also a session which will be characterized by active work in terms of budgetary activities and so on. And we expect, Madam Speaker, that the business of the House, particularly the legislative agenda, will be moving apace. Madam Speaker, the fact that we want to spend a little more time looking at the standing orders, as you have correctly said, and to also look at other areas of efficiencies that the House needs to address, so that when we finish this session, we would have completed a full year's work and activities and prepare ourselves for the start of fiscal 24-25. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. Leader of Opposition Business.
Madam Speaker, I join with the Leader of Government Business to also express on our behalf our best wishes to you and to the staff, and to congratulate the newly appointed acting appointees and to wish them well. And of course, to our colleagues, we're looking for a good year as we embark on the work of this chamber, not unmindful of the fact that we continue to be under public glare Only, I think yesterday or today, there was an article about our workload, and I believe in this regard, probably if we were to be a lot more intentional in advising the public of the workload, because I was just going through my diary last year and saw the number of times I had to attend committee meetings, and many of the committees now are meeting online, and that is the work of the Parliament. So I think we have to be a lot more intentional. The leader of government business has spoken about private members' motion, and I'm happy that we consulted before today to appreciate how we're going to be doing them, especially as he has also pointed out that we are, in this segment, going to be dealing with budget presentation, and perhaps we might want to contemplate, even while we do the budget, and because we do have some items on the private members' motion that are time sensitive, we might wish to see how we can intertwine some of those with the budget debate so as to clear the backlog. I really believe that we have an opportunity to deal with that. There's one in particular, by the way, Leader, that was tabled by the member from South St. Catherine. I'm sorry I'm doing this to you because we should really have discussed it. It has to do with the whole banking system and so on. There was a referral to a committee. So it's not intended for a debate to take place here, but for a committee to deal with those matters, which are urgent matters. And I'm sure you would not want to prevent that from happening. And probably if not this week, we could look at taking it next week. But we will discuss it more fulsomely. So Madam Speaker, we're looking forward to an exciting, well, a productive session as we anticipate the work ahead. Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank the opposition, leader of opposition business for the comments that he made, and particularly to assure him that as we have been collaborating to ensure the efficiencies of this House, we will continue so to do to enable the business of the people that are so critical to be carried through with ease, as much alacrity as is possible under the circumstances, bearing in mind also that there are some measures that have come which will require a little more detailed activity and involvement, especially from ministers, before we can properly take them, so that when the debates are over, we will achieve the objectives that are set. So, Madam Speaker, the business of the House today, I would implore you to proceed as per the agenda. And the first item on the agenda will be statement by ministers. And for today, there will be two statements. A statement from the Minister of Culture, Gender, Sports and Entertainment, and my very able Deputy House Leader, the Honorable Olivia Babsy-Grange, OJ, and from the Minister of Education, the Honorable Favour Williams, in that order. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. Orderly, would you be so kind as to take the podium for Minister? Let us welcome members. This is the start of the year, and we have had a consistent lull of chatting and bickering for the entire session since we began. Members, let us welcome to her feet Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sports, member for St. Catherine Central.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to wish my colleagues, Madam Speaker, and you all the best for 2024. It will be a great year for us. Well, if it is, applaud. It's going to be a great year for you. So, Madam Speaker, I rise today proudly to tell you and the nation that you will recall that this Honorable House and the Senate approved amendments to the Domestic Violence Act in December. I report today that His Excellency the Governor General has given assent to the Domestic Violence Amendment Act 2023, and that it is my intention to bring the law as amended into effect on Monday, January the 2nd. Next. 22nd. This government, and indeed the whole House, has demonstrated its commitment to preventing and punishing acts of domestic violence through the passage of these important amendments, which will, among other things, allow the court to issue protection orders and impose a penalty of up to $1 million for breach of a protection order, and up from a maximum of $10,000 and a sentence of up to 1 year in prison. The protection orders are intended to guard against an array of potential harm, from harassment to property damage. And it is right with the passage of time that we now apply a more appropriate penalty that will serve as a deterrent to this very serious crime. The new law, Madam Speaker, will also increase the categories of persons who can make an application for a protection order, including the spouse or parent of an individual in respect of whom the conduct has been made or is likely to be made. The children advocate will also now be able to apply for a protection order where the alleged conduct is threatened against a child. Additionally, Madam Speaker, the amended legislation will allow the Minister for Gender Affairs to flexibly amend monetary penalties. Madam Speaker, let the word go out from here that we are serious about dealing with domestic abuse. A new day has come for protecting victims and increasing the punishment for perpetrators of domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is not inevitable. It doesn't have to happen. There is no excuse for abuse. And we can end the abuse. The amendment of our legislation is part of our effort to end the abuse. And I'm saying to all women out there, and men, don't be afraid. There is protection for you. We continue to improve our services to victims, punish perpetrators, and review our laws to create effective deterrence to would-be perpetrators. In this regard, I look forward to the deliberations of the Joint Select Committee that will review the Domestic Violence Act towards strengthening the protection of victims and dealing appropriately with perpetrators. Madam Speaker, as I close, I take this opportunity to urge the woman or man listening to me and feels trapped in a violent relationship. My sister, my brother, there is hope. Your life can change. It doesn't have to be the way it is. In the last few years, we have significantly improved our support program for people facing domestic violence through my ministry and through the Ministry of National Security. We have opened 2 government shelters and a 3rd is on the way. We have now fully operationalized the National Gender-Based Violence Helpline, and we now have more staff to provide psychosocial support and counseling. I want to say to them, just call the helpline or text us, and we will help. Madam Speaker, with your permission, I will read out the helpline numbers. The helpline numbers for women are 876-553-0372 and 876-236-1713. The helpline number for men is 876-553-0387. Madam Speaker, I'm going to ask each member of Parliament, keep those numbers handy. I remember once I spoke publicly and I gave my number on the television. And up to today, I'm getting calls. And my number is also on my Facebook page. So don't be afraid to make your numbers available to your constituents so that they can get the information from you. And we currently have a strong media campaign as well, advertising those lines. So just make that call or send us a text, and we will help. Many times, I will get the calls, and when I call back, the person can't answer the phone. But you certainly can text. And so, Madam Speaker, I'm really happy that we're able now to have the amendments effective. And I want to thank all my colleagues here in Parliament, here in the House of Representatives, and in the Senate, who moved expeditiously to ensure that the amendments were passed before the end of the year. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Responding is the member from St. Catherine Eastern. Member?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I too would want to lend my voice in saying a very happy new year, and we look forward for a very good and continuous relationship, working relationship, in making sure that the people of this country is represented. Madam Speaker, I want to add my voice, as usual, for getting this piece of legislation passed and to get it in effect by the 22nd of January. Very timely, and I believe it is something that needs much more than just a phone number. We need now, Madam Minister, to start the public education. We cannot continue, and I'm saying this because by speaking to a number of my constituents about the way in which the men, more so, because even though we include men, and we are now including the children advocate, it is now reached a point, Madam Speaker, where a neighbor can make such a report. It don't just have to be in your household. And therefore, it is very important that we step up with the public education, because I am certain, while we want to prevent persons from committing these crimes, we also want to make sure that our system is not backlogged, because persons are going to say they did not know and they did not understand. So hand in hand, Madam Minister, we have to start now with the public education. I also want to know, in terms of the committee that is going to be formed, what is our terms of reference? I do not know if you have established that as yet, but I would love to know. Because if we can add in it, because I notice we keep brushing public education aside, if we could add in it, in the terms of reference, how we treat public education, I believe that would go a far way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, member.
Madam Speaker, I just want to indicate to the House and my counterpart, who who shadows gender matters, that the public education program has started, and it's going to be further expanded. And also the Joint Select Committee will meet shortly, and at that point we will establish the full terms of reference, and we will meet online and in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Next to her feet will be the Minister of Education and Youth, the member from St. Andrew Eastern.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me also wish my colleagues Happy New Year and a prosperous one. I know that we're all looking forward to 2024 and the efforts that will bear fruit for 2024. Madam Speaker, I rise to provide an update to the members of this Honourable House on the new Easter term. As you know, it's the second term of the 2023-24 academic year, and it began on January 1, 2024, and runs until April 30th of 2024. All schools at the infant, primary, and secondary levels resumed with full operations on January 7, with the exception of a few secondary schools that resumed on January 10 due to staggered resumption schedules. Madam Speaker, allow me to express my heartfelt condolences to the families, schools, and communities that have lost students, teachers, and staff members. These losses are devastating, and they shake the foundation of our education sector. But let me share, Madam Speaker, that members of the Ministry of Education and Youth Guidance and Counseling units have been offering grief support to the schools and families, as is customary. Madam Speaker, this term will see intense preparation for exit and external exams that include the Primary Exit Profile, PEP, Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate, CSEC, City and Guilds, National Council on Technical and Vocational Education and Training, NCT VET, and Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Education, CAPE exams. The dates for these exams are set and schools have been made aware. On the matter of school safety and security, Madam Speaker, as you know, the safety and security of our students and staff in schools continue to be a priority. Our survey done in July of last year showed 154 schools with a total of 1,955 CCTV cameras. We're preparing the procurement to enable system-wide installations and coordination of security cameras across the education system. This year, an additional 8 schools have benefited from $15 million in grants to procure CCTV cameras that will improve safety and security at their schools. Madam Speaker, we're ramping up restorative justice practice in schools, along with conflict resolution in collaboration with the Ministry of Justice, my colleague minister sitting right here. Approximately 3,600 students across 120 schools will benefit from this training. And Madam Speaker, the team at the Ministry of Education and Youth looks forward to continuing the dialogue with another colleague minister, the Minister of Science, Energy, Telecommunications, and Transport, to develop an expanded rural transportation program that will benefit more than the current 7,500 students, a program that currently costs approximately 390 million annually. On the matter of further collaboration, I'm happy to share with the members of this Honorable House that 150 students across 10 secondary schools will benefit from cognitive behavior therapy training made possible by USAID, Positive Pathways to Guidance counselors and social workers within the targeted schools. Cognitive behavior therapy training raises awareness of depression, anxiety, personality disorders, and other socio-emotional issues. Madam Speaker, I am also sharing news that the Literacy Education Acceleration Program, LEAP, will be provided to 6 additional high schools, and 10 primary schools will benefit from creative language-based learning through the support of the British High Commission. And the creative language-based learning recognizes the negative impact that sensory cognitive deficits have on a child's learning ability. The results from the Literacy Education Acceleration Program are very encouraging. 60% of the targeted group improved at least 1 grade level. 29% increased 2+ grade levels, and 10% increased 3+ grade levels in this program. So we are very encouraged, and we look forward to a greater rollout of this program and the impact it will have on literacy in our schools. But Madam Speaker, that is not all. 500 medium and high-risk students from 24 schools under the Interministerial School Support Strategy, a partnership with the Ministry of National Security, will continue to benefit from targeted interventions, psychosocial support, case management services, and behavior change intervention programs. This is in tandem with the ongoing efforts to complete the Safe School policy with the support of UNICEF. Under parenting, Madam Speaker, we understand that parents play a pivotal role in the lives of their children, and as such, the Ministry of Education and Youth, through the National Parenting Support Commission, will continue to train parents in our parent education program. And I want to reiterate that we're seeking to train in this school year a minimum of 100,000 Jamaican parents. And the NPSC, National Parenting Support Commission, will continue to drive this through a number of activities, including parent mentoring, mentorship training, and the reactivation of all parent places, all aimed at boosting parent engagement. Madam Speaker, educators are the profession that makes all other professions possible. And so we continue to invest in our educators. The nation's teachers and principals at the early childhood, primary, and secondary levels will continue to upskill themselves in numerous professional development opportunities through the National College for Educational Leadership, NCEL, and the Jamaica Teaching Council, JTC. I am pleased to share that all remaining teachers and lecturers are expected to receive their laptops this term. There will be more smart/electronic whiteboards, more multimedia projectors, and more computer labs in primary and secondary schools that will serve as the basis for the development of critical skills for the digital age. Madam Speaker, ICT is a major pillar as we transform education for national development. I was delighted to learn recently from Honorable Dana Morris-Dixon of the results of a psychometric assessment of those students who registered for the LIFT program. In the area of digital literacy, simulation, and verbal reasoning, the averages were 82% and 79% respectively. Thank you, whoever did that. I believe in the value that teachers bring to our schools and communities, and this is evidenced in my recent Teacher Tuesday feature on social media that seeks to highlight the good work being done in schools across Jamaica by phenomenal educators, and I want to say congratulations to all of them. Under infrastructure and connectivity, Madam Speaker, we will continue the work to have all our schools connected with broadband internet. To date, Madam Speaker and colleagues, we have 663 schools connected to the broadband internet. And we will be getting to more infant schools, primary schools, and secondary schools this term. Thank you to one of our important partners, Digicel, who has set up smart rooms in 11 primary schools and has committed to another 10 in this upcoming financial year. On infrastructure, Madam Speaker, this government is proud of its record of de-shifting schools across Jamaica. Since 2019, we have de-shifted Friendship Primary in St. Catherine, Albert Town High School in Trelawney, Exchange All Age in St. Anne, Cedric Titus High School in Trelawney, Marley Mount Primary in St. Catherine, Black River High School in St. Elizabeth, Grange Hill Primary in Westmoreland, and in construction is Bridgeport High School in St. Catherine. We're expected to open it. We're expected to de-shift them September 2024, and construction will begin in June of this year so we can de-shift Jonathan Grant High School in St. Catherine. And the work continues, Madam Speaker, the work continues to de-shift all the schools that are on the shift currently, and there are some 30. Yes, Lacovia is, yes, they are coming up. Yes, yes. Madam Speaker, I take this opportunity to remind members that while January is Earthquake Awareness Month, tomorrow will be observed as Earthquake Awareness Day for schools. All schools, as per directives from the Ministry of Education and Youth, in partnership with the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM, are encouraged to conduct earthquake safety drills. Madam Speaker and members of this honorable House, let us remember to drop, cover, and hold on when necessary.
Minister.
In closing, Madam Speaker, education is trending as we showcase the work being done in the sector to implement the 365 recommendations across the 7 pillars as outlined in the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission report, otherwise known as the Orlando Patterson-led report. Thank you for your time and attention. May God bless all of us as we continue to do the work for our beloved country, Jamaica.
Responding is the member from St. Andrew Southeastern.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I join my colleagues in wishing you all the best for 2024. I won't use that term. I'd say productive. Minister, in relation to the Education Transformation Report, one of my disappointments has been that the House itself has not been privy to a full debate on the recommendations, and I would encourage you on a quarterly basis to bring a full list of where we are with the implementation of the recommendations. I know an oversight committee was established. I understand that there's a chief transformation officer, but I must tell you as a member of this House, I can't say where we are in that process. And given that this is so critical to almost everything that we do, I believe it's important that we know up to 365, whether we have done 5 or 10, and what the progress is, what the cost is, what the challenges are. So I'm encouraging you to, on a, whether it be quarterly or some other periodic basis, that you come to the House with that. The second question I have relates to the laptops and that the teachers and lecturers. Can you indicate how many or what percentage of the teachers are yet to receive? And is this the laptops that were committed from the heads of agreement signed between the JTA and the Ministry of Finance, I believe in 2018, but don't hold me to the year. But I know there was a heads of agreement signed. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about special needs children. There's a real deficit in the education system in, one, assessing children who have special needs. Many of the kids who we say don't now learn, they have challenges, and they are not either recommended for assessment, or if they are recommended, the cost of doing an assessment is prohibitive. And secondly, there are very few professionals who can do assessments. So if you go privately, you have a wait list of up to a year. I want to know what the ministry is doing to, one, provide more support for parents who have those special needs children, who need the assessment, and then once the assessment is done, to provide a pathway for their learning, which is going to be slightly different from the normal stream. Many of them end up being the problem of the Minister of National Security because they become troubled children. And we say them can't learn, head tough, need to lick. Those are the things we say. But they have issues. But those issues are just undetected throughout. And those issues were amplified over the 2-year period where we didn't have face-to-face. And the final thing I want to, again, we know resources are tight, but there's again a huge deficit in terms of parents who have those special needs children, who need to place them in educational institutions outside of the normal schools, and they simply don't have the resources to place them in a private institution. The private institutions are prohibitively expensive. Those fees are tertiary level type fees. And again, many of the children get left behind because the parents can't afford it.
Member from St. Catherine Eastern.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Minister, I have some concerns in the direction that
Member from St. Catherine Eastern,
yes.
You are required to ask the questions.
Thank you very much. Madam Minister, can you say what mechanism are you using to determine for those who you have now on your list to be getting special treatment in terms of psychiatric treatment and other treatments in the school? Do you have, can you say whether or not you have a register, or how do you go about identifying these students?
Minister, turn your mic on.
Sure. All right, thank you for the questions, members. In terms of implementation of the recommendations and updating Parliament, I have no problems doing that because we do have an oversight committee that reports to the nation as well, so there's information that can be brought to Parliament. The report was actually tabled in Parliament, and we can move to bring that to the floor to debate it and so on. So I have no problems with the updates, giving updates to Parliament. On your question with regards to the laptops, let me see the number. 22,000 teachers have already received their laptops out of a cadre of 26,000. So that's 85% of our teachers. And e-learning, who is our implementing agency, is responsible for procurement and for ensuring that the laptops are received by teachers. You asked if this was part of the heads of agreement. I recall in, I don't know, but you said 2018, you're not sure. I recall in 2016-17 that there was an agreement, but it was for the smaller devices, the tablets at that time, and those were handed over. The laptops are, it's another procurement, another significant procurement. In terms of special needs, I'll be the first to admit that we have a lot still that we need to do to ensure that we provide adequately for special needs students. But we are very close to completing yet another diagnostic center at Case. So the eastern end of the island will have one. There's already one in Montego Bay, middle of the island, and so forth. I agree with you in terms of the waiting time, and so we have to create more capacity for this to happen. We do provide some financial resources to those who have to access private care. And we do place special needs students with private providers as well. We have a roster of entities that provide special needs services for our students. Psychiatric treatment, what was that? Do we have enough? You're saying, do we have? How do we determine? If I register.
The member from St. Catherine Eastern, would you be so kind as to repeat on the mic for the benefit of the minister? And minister, after that, you have a final question from the member from St. Catherine Western, not you yet, member from Western. You have a follow-up, and then a follow-up question from the member from St. Andrew Southeast. And Minister, that closes the statement by Minister. So would you be so kind, Ministers, to take the notes and then have the members complete their questions and you wrap up in responding. Minister, could you also be mindful that the responses need to be efficient and not long-winded? Thank you. Member from St. Catherine Eastern first.
Minister, I was just trying.
She didn't hear, remember part of the question yes. So
right,
you're just going to repeat that for her hearing.
For you to explain the mechanism that you have used, because you said you have a rollout now in terms of students who will be getting psychiatric treatment. You have students now who will be getting counseling. And those students have already identified, and you have identified guidance counselors. I'm just asking you, what mechanism are you using to identify these students so that you know exactly if those who are getting the treatment are really deserving of it?
Minister, hold on. Member from St. Andrew Western next.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, could you apprise us on how many schools remain on the shift system as part of the reform program? How many schools remain on the shift system? And what is the timeline for getting that situation rectified? What is the timeline you're working with?
And Minister, finally, there is also a follow-up from the member from St. Andrew Southeast.
Press you think. Yeah, Minister, I've gotten on the same special needs issue a number of complaints about shadows who are resigning from the job because of the very low remuneration provided to them. I don't know, again, I know resources are tight, but is that an area that the ministry is looking at to improve it? Shadows are specialized, trained teachers. They are in demand, and there are many who are just leaving. Those are the ones that would have been paid by the government.
Thank you, Member. Minister, turn your mic.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just let me recommit the question as it relates to special needs. Earlier on that was asked. So we have partnerships with 17 private institutions that include prep schools offering special needs support. 20 of our public schools offer special education institutions. We have assessment centers at Sam Sharp, Michael, Church, and Case to come online. Our special needs assessors they have degrees in education, psychology, clinical psychology, they're diagnosticians, and we have our regional team to support special needs assessment and placement of students. And in terms of the register of students, how do we determine our counselors and social workers make the referrals of the students? And as to the question about how many schools are on the shift system, 30. 30 schools remain on the shift system. And what's the time frame? It requires us building extra classrooms. So, it's just the procurement process and getting that done. A block of school takes about 10 to 12 months to complete. So we have 30 schools, so it'll be multi-years. Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have approximately 500 shadows in the system. And as you know, the government has been going through just a relook at everything with regards to compensation and so on. And so the Ministry of Education continues to do our part too, to look at how we can rebalance the scales as well.
Thank you, Minister. Announcements?
Laid on the table of the House are the following. Planning Institute of Jamaica publication on Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions 2021. Annual report of the Jamaica Tourist Board for the financial year 2020-2021. Annual report of the Office of the Public Defender for the years 2019, 2020, and 2021. Annual report of the Auditor General's Department for the financial year 2022-2023, annual report and audited financial statements of the General Legal Counsel for the financial year 2022-2023, along with its related Ministry Paper numbered 01 of 2024, Ministry Paper numbers 02 and 03 of 2024, entitled Certified Appropriation Accounts, Head 0500 Recurrent, Auditor General's Departments for the financial years 2021, 2022, and 2022, 2023, respectively. Report on the Appropriation Accounts, Head 0500 Recurrent, Auditor General's Department 2021, 2022, and 2022-2023. The Auditor General's Department Certified Appropriation Accounts, Head 1500A, Office of the Prime Minister for the year 2018-2019, Head numbered 19,000 from the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation for the year 2019-2020, Head 217, Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, Public Debt Servicing Debt Amortization for the year 2019-2020. Head 256 from the Tax Administration, Jamaica, for the year 2021-2022. And finally, we have a report of the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee on its deliberations on the Integrity Commission's reports of investigations into concerns that employees of the Kingston and St. Andrew Metropolitan Corporation had failed to submit their statutory declarations to the Commission for the years 2019, 2020, and 2021. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Bills brought from the Senate.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate. To the Honorable House of Representatives, I have the honor to advise the House of Representatives that on the 21st day of December 2023, the bill entitled An Act to Amend the Domestic Violence Act was passed in the Senate without amendment. Thomas Tavares Finson, OJ, CD, KC, JP, President of the Senate. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Petitions, papers, reports from committees.
Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of the House a copy of the report of the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee on its deliberations on the Integrity Commission's report of investigations into the concerns that employees of the Kingston and St. Andrew Metropolitan Corporation, KSAMC, failed to submit their statutory declarations to the Commission for the years 2019, 2020, and 2021.
Thank you. Notices of motions given orally. Questions and answers to questions. Notices of motions given orally. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House I will move. Be it resolved that the report of the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee on its deliberations on the Integrity Commission's reports of investigations into concerns that employees of the Kingston and St. Andrew Metropolitan Corporation, KSAMC, failed to submit their statutory declarations to the Commission for the years 2019, 2020, and 2021, which was laid on the table of the House on the 16th day of February 2024, be adopted. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
House Leader, would you be so kind as to make one correction? The date is the 16th of January instead of 16th of February.
Madam Speaker, the 16th of January, as is stated.
Thank you, House Leader. Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sitting of the House, motions for leave to introduce bills, presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained, public business. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, there will be two matters on public business today. Of course, one will be for the approval of the report of the Oversight Committee of the Integrity Commission, and the second will be from the Minister of Justice, who will be debating the report on the three matters. One, Criminal Justice Administration Amendment Act 2023, the Offense Against the Persons Amendment Act 2023, and the Child Care and Protection Amendment Act 2023. Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The report having been tabled in the House, would require that members, of course, would have read the report and would, in fact, recognize that, indeed, your committee reviewed the reports from the Integrity Commission and found them to be in order and consequently has approved all the reports and have submitted it, and at this time would ask that the House gives favorable consideration to the approval of the reports as presented. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Those in favor? Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Podium, please.
Madam Speaker, I now move that we start the debate on the reports of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the bill shortly entitled the Criminal Justice Administrative Amendment Act 2023, the Offences Against the Person Act 2023, and the Child Care and Protection Act 2023. Madam Speaker, I will open the debate and I will suspend immediately after opening, because apart from, I think, Madam Speaker, this is such an important matter that not only will I allow members additional time to look at the report, but also to allow as many members as possible who would like to participate to do so, and they can continue to do so next week. Madam Speaker, this is a matter that started earlier last year, and indeed the Joint Select Committee was put together on the 19th of April 2023, and Madam Speaker, we allowed extensive consultations, discussions. All persons were invited to participate, make their recommendations, consider the issues, and certainly, Madam Speaker, everyone who wanted to participate could participate. 11 civil society groups participated, made their recommendations. Their recommendations were considered. The Joint Select Committee considered them and made some recommendations, which I will intimate shortly. But, Madam Speaker, this Parliament should be aware that the question of murder is probably the greatest challenge this country faces at this time. There's no doubt, Madam Speaker, that this country, over the last 20+ years, have had in excess of 1,000 murders per year. For a small country like Jamaica, not only is it excessive, embarrassing, but it is something that every single Jamaican must be not only aware of, must do and play their part to see how we can reduce this level of killings within the Jamaican society. Madam Speaker, our country could move forward much faster, but for crime and especially violence. When I travel abroad, Madam Speaker, there are many Jamaicans who would like to return to live and retire in this country, but for crime and violence. And Madam Speaker, we as a parliament must do everything in our powers to see how we can control the behavior of our people to reduce murders to tolerable level. Madam Speaker, when you have a country like Singapore, almost twice the population, and when they have 20 and 22, 25 murders per year, it is an emergency. If we could have that per week, we would be, be happy. Not happy, but per month, even per month. But even per week, it would be tolerable. And Madam Speaker, Singapore, with a population of over 5 million, almost twice our population, per year, it is just in the 20s. Madam Speaker, it is quite clear to me that we have to use all the measures necessary, all the strategies to keep murder, killings, violence, criminality, all crimes, Madam Speaker, under control. So, Madam Speaker, the penalties that we considered under these bills, proposed amendments, we know that they by themselves cannot solve the problems. But the increased measures, the proposed penalties, are intended, Madam Speaker, to send the signal that those who take life, those who contemplate taking life, must appreciate that if they do, and they are caught and apprehended, that they will not have, or should I put it positively, they will remain in custody for a very, very long time. In other words, Madam Speaker, it cannot be that those who contemplate and take life feel that they can avoid a long term of imprisonment. And there's no doubt, Madam Speaker, the intention of these amendments is to ensure that those who take life, that they get their just deserts. Madam Speaker, it is true that in the past, a conviction for murder was the death penalty. And it was only 30-odd years ago we decided in this Parliament to have two categories of murders, capital murder and non-capital murder. Capital murder was intended to be the most egregious of killings, and non-capital murder, less egregious, but oftentimes domestic murders. But I begin, Madam Speaker, by emphasizing, and this is important this Parliament bear in mind, that if the penalty for murder is not proportionate to the egregiousness of the crime, we are going to have victims and their families take justice in their hands. So it is one thing, Madam Speaker, as many of the bodies who came before us, they speak about rehabilitation, what can be done for the offenders, how can we ensure that they, after their sentence, that they can return to the society and live a useful life and avoid committing further crimes. But at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, we cannot ignore the fact that when you take life and you're charged and convicted, there is a victim who is 6 feet down. And even though that victim cannot speak, the families, friends, and the society at large are very concerned about what is the justice for those victims. And in truth, Madam Speaker, this Parliament must reflect and balance what is justice, not only for the offender, but also for the victims who can't speak. And therefore, Madam Speaker, our Parliament must bear in mind that the victims of murder, they don't have a voice, but this Parliament must speak for them. Because, Madam Speaker, the truth of the matter is that there are many families of victims who speak and are frustrated with some of the sentences imposed. I'm not blaming the courts, because the courts frequently do have to take into consideration many, many factors. But at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, we can't ignore what the society is calling on us as legislators as to what is appropriate for murder. So, Madam Speaker, let me first of all set out what the present position is, and also what is a proposal and recommendation before this Parliament from the Joint Select Committee. Madam Speaker, for capital murder, the present position is either death or life imprisonment without parole, but if a sentence of life sentence is imposed, that the person must serve, the convicted killer must serve at least 20 years before becoming eligible for parole. Madam Speaker, the recommendation from the Joint Select Committee is that the sentence for the capital murder should remain death or life imprisonment. But if life imprisonment is imposed, that the sentence should be a minimum serve of 50 years before consideration for parole. And Madam Speaker, you're speaking now of the most egregious crime, capital murder. And if death is not imposed and he gets life imprisonment, then he must either serve his rest of his life in prison, which means life imprisonment without parole. Or the judge might say, you must serve 50 years before you're considered for parole. That is the most egregious killing, Madam Speaker, which 30, 40 years ago, it would have been death. Madam Speaker, for capital murder, for non-capital murder, the present position is life imprisonment or a fixed term of imprisonment. If it is life imprisonment, the person must serve at least 15 years before consideration for parole. If it's a fixed term, they must serve at least 10 years before becoming eligible for parole. Madam Speaker, the consensus and the proposal from the Joint Select Committee is that life sentence, if it is imposed for non-capital murder, the convicted killer must serve at least 40 years before being eligible for parole. If a fixed term of imprisonment is imposed, then they must serve, it must not be less than 30 years, if a fixed term. But they must serve at least 20 years before becoming eligible for parole. Madam Speaker, let me make it very clear that these sentences should be harsh, should be severe, so that persons who contemplate murder must recognize that if they engage in murder, they don't have much of a future in the society. They will return to the prisons and spend a long time. And that is, I accept, when we catch them. And hopefully more will be caught, especially with technology and forensics. But I want to say, Madam Speaker, there are many cases, especially of domestic murders, where, Madam Speaker, there's not necessarily in a long contemplation about killing. It may be on the spur of the moment, and the person regrets it after. In those cases, oftentimes they plead and are prepared to plead guilty. These sentences don't necessarily apply. They're guides. So once they plead guilty, they can negotiate under the Plea Bargaining Act an appropriate sentence, but in negotiating the appropriate sentence, the victims' families and friends must be considered. In other words, it's not just a question that the defense lawyer say this is the appropriate sentence. The victims' families should be considered, and at the end of the day, the judge will be the final arbiter what is the appropriate sentence. And these sentences, Madam Speaker, must send that signal to those who want to fight the system, who want to fight the case, that if they do fight the case and get convicted, they will serve a very long time in prison. But if they admit and confess to what they have done, they can negotiate with defense, with the prosecution, and have the judge impose an appropriate sentence. So, Madam Speaker, we are not taking it all away from the judges. The judges will play a part for those convicts who plead guilty, and an appropriate sentence can be adjudicated by the defense counsel, the prosecution, and sanctioned by the judge. Madam Speaker, let me make it clear, because people oftentimes say that we are taking away the sentence from the judges. Truth of the matter, the judges across the Commonwealth have said that at the end of the day, the legislature has a part to play. It is the legislature who respond to the passions, who respond to the complaints, who respond to the various arguments and conflicts within the society. It is the executive, it is the legislature that have to respond to the spiraling criminality within our society. And at the end of the day, the sentence of the court, yes, has to reflect what the society is feeling. And it is the legislature that can best determine what the public and the society is feeling. And therefore, it is in this parliament, every single one of us, opposition, government, can determine whether these sentences properly reflect what the society is feeling. Because the society is asking, Madam Speaker, for punishment that is proportionate to the egregiousness, the nature and gravity of the criminality in our society. And when this legislature, Madam Speaker, fails to reflect what the society is asking for, we would have failed in our duties. And therefore, Madam Speaker, yes, we must do everything to catch the criminals. But when we catch them, and they are convicted, they must get their just desserts. Madam Speaker, sentencing is not an easy decision. And having been in the legal system for many decades, the judges will tell you, this is not a scientific decision. They're really baffled as to the appropriate sentence. And that is why when they get a signal from the legislature, I can tell you, Madam Speaker, they're happy. I can tell you, Madam Speaker, the National Council on Justice, when police officers, when the Ministry of National Security and the Ministry of Justice complains about the sentence, the Chief Justice and the judges will tell you it is in your portfolio. You can decide what is the appropriate sentence. Once the legislature decides, we will follow by that guidelines. So, Madam Speaker, what we are doing here is to send the guidelines, the appropriate measures that the judges must comply with. Not that we are dictating to them, but we are reflecting what the society is demanding. Because it is what we have agreed in this Parliament, and if you have alternative proposal, put it forward. But what we decide here is what we expect that will be complied with on the bench. So, Madam Speaker, where we had some problems, where we had a lot of concerns, are the sentences to be imposed on children. First, Madam Speaker, children under 14 years, we are not troubling it. They cannot be sentenced beyond what is provided for in the present law. Children under 14. But children 14 to 17, Madam Speaker, the present law is that they can be sentenced like an adult, which means the sentences that I just quoted. But we, in discussion, Madam Speaker, have determined that for capital murder, a child 14 to 17 can't be sentenced to death, but could be sentenced to life imprisonment or a fixed term of 50 years. And life imprisonment or the fixed term, they must serve at least 20 years before they are considered for parole. That is where a child 14 to 17 has committed capital murder. Where a child 14 to 17 has committed non-capital murder, they can be sentenced up to 30 years, and they must serve at least 15 years before being considered for parole. Now, Madam Speaker, the truth of the matter is that not less than 30 years. Sorry, not less than 30 years, and they must serve at least 15 years. So, Madam Speaker, we had many, and indeed, the time of the Joint Select Committee, a lot of it was spent determining whether, in fact, children should really be imposed with these sentences. Question is, these are children of tender age. They need help. They need to be given special considerations. But, Madam Speaker, the truth of the matter is, these children, 14 to 17, are committing some serious crimes. And they're killing similar children of a similar age, and even adults. And the question, Madam Speaker, if this Parliament, fail to send a signal that these children should have a harsh penalty, if we fail to do that, Madam Speaker, I urge the families of the victims will feel they got no justice. And not only will they feel they got no justice, they may well find ways and means to retaliate and to take it out. So, Madam Speaker, these sentences where we say that even though these children are of tender age, they must serve at least 15 or 20 years, is to send the right signal not only to the offender and the offender's families, but also to the victims' families, that justice is being done. Because, Madam Speaker, if justice is not being done, then it means that injustice is being done to the families and the victims' families. And therefore, Madam Speaker, much as I and all the presenters would be happy to say, we must consider the life of the offender, who is 14 to 17. And remember that in 15 or 20 years' time, they will return to the society. Much as we would like to help them, that they can go to the Heart Institute, that they can get their degree, their CXC and their PhD, and they will become good citizens afterwards. At the end of the day, Madam Speaker, we can't ignore the victim and the victims' families. Because if we ignore the victims and the victims' families, they will say this Parliament is pursuing injustice rather than justice. And this Parliament, Madam Speaker, must balance and ensure that the victims and the victims' families feel that the sentence that we are sending and the sentence of the court reflect the act that the offender did to the victim. No, we are not going to hang them. And I'm the first to tell you I don't believe in hanging. But, Madam Speaker, we cannot just knock young offenders 14 to 17 on their wrist. We have to lock them up for a long period of time and let them reflect and improve their ways. So, Madam Speaker, I would like this Parliament to send a signal to every nook and cranny across this country that we are intolerant of murders. Yes, we are. And if this Parliament is not prepared to do justice to the victims, that the victims' families will take it out on the streets. And that is why we have so many cases of reprisal, retaliation, and revenge. It is a significant proportion of the murders that are committed in this country. And I say, Madam Speaker, that this is a seminal moment in this Parliament when we must send that clear and unmistakable message to all Jamaica that murders will not be tolerated. And not only that, yes, we need to catch them. Yes, we need the support of all the well-thinking citizens of this country to get all killers properly brought before justice. Because at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, the government, the police cannot do it alone. We need the help of our citizens to ensure that all killers are brought to justice. And yes, Madam Speaker, I accept that unless we catch them, the penalties can't be imposed. And that is why all the citizens of this country must be determined that those who take life must get their justice. And when they are reported and they get their justice and the sentence that they get, then we feel that we can move forward. And we feel that Jamaica can be returned to a place of peace. Because, Madam Speaker, these penalties may not solve all the problems, but it is a step to send a signal to killers when we catch you. And we convict you, you're going to spend a long time in jail. That is the message, Madam Speaker, that we're sending to those who kill and are convicted. And I urge other members to participate next week when we hope to close this debate. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. House Leader. I don't see any mics on, and no, the debate is being suspended. That is what was said at the beginning. He's not closing. He had asked at the beginning to suspend the debate after opening, and we would continue the debate next week and give members sufficient time to prepare. So, Member, House Leader will speak to you after.
And we have to bury them. And I know you will understand when a family member has passed, the family has to rally around.
Sorry, member, I have not been made privy to that apology as yet.
I know. It is drafted, not delivered. So I seek your permission to speak, Madam.
Madam Speaker.
House Leader.
May I think, Madam Speaker, the member, the minister who is piloting the bill did ask that the debate be suspended so as to allow. But we heard. So, Madam Speaker, the member can indeed ask for a reversal of that request, so as to enable a continuation of the debate until, some point later on. But the member, therefore, has exactly.
Madam Speaker, as intimated, I ask for the suspension of the debate, and I will allow all members who want to speak the time to speak. Next week or the week after. Thanks.
Madam, I believe that the offer from the minister, I just want to get it very clear that it will not be suspended or ended next week. Because I have very strong views. Because we cannot ask the taxpayers of Jamaica.
Your suitable comments were sufficiently indicative of your strong views. You will have a chance
to pay for mind them
you will have a chance for that member. Your mic is on for us to get that clarity.
I apologize, Madam.
Yes, you
but
will
we
have.
Must hang them.
No. House Leader, order in the Parliament. So, order in the Parliament, member. Please take your seat. House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just want to assure the House in all its forms that whenever an undertaking is given, it will be carried through. The member has asked that the debate be suspended so as to allow for more participation for next week, and we will honor that to the letter. May it please you, Madam Speaker. And yes, until the debate is completed, whether it takes 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whenever. And that is in the order and the best tradition of our democracy in this honorable House. Madam Speaker, it isn't intended to do any further business today. I therefore ask that the House be adjourned for a date to be fixed. May I please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The question is that this House do now adjourn for a date to be set. Those in favor? Those against? This honorable House now stands adjourned.
Traveling to Jamaica? Submit your customs and immigration declaration online for faster processing. Visit the enterjamaica.com portal complete and submit your declaration prior to departure. Upon arrival, proceed to the immigration kiosk and swipe your passport to confirm your trip details